Hello, and welcome to the Object Management Group's Bright Talk channel. My name is Meg Duncan, and I am a marketing specialist here at OMG. The Object Management Group is an international, open membership, not-for-profit technology standards consortium. OMG task forces develop enterprise integration standards for a wide range of technologies and an even wider range of industries. We are very pleased to host today's webinar, Business Architecture, the Gateway to Business Transformation, presented by William Ulrich, partner of BAA Inc. and president, co-founder of the Business Architecture Guild, and a longtime member of the OMG, where he serves as a co-chair of the Architecture-Driven Modernization Platform Task Force. The webinar is scheduled to last 1 hour. There will be approximately 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for questions and answers. If we run out of time before we get to your question, please visit OMG's website at www.omg.org or the Business Architecture Guild at www.businessarchitectureguild.org for more information. There are several attachments to this webinar, including a recent magazine article and links to upcoming events. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and I now pass the baton to Bill Ulrich.
Thank you, Meg. Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar. So this webinar is being provided by Business Architecture Guild, of which I'm a co-founder and president, and with additional material provided by Business Architecture Associates. We're discussing business architecture, the gateway to business transformation. All material is copyrighted to Business Architecture Guild at businessarchitectureguild.org. What we want to talk about today is an overview and a discussion of how business architecture provides a gateway to business transformation. We're going to cover a framing of business architecture and discuss the business ecosystem that it provides transparency to. We're going to talk about defining the business architecture value proposition and how it drives strategy through actionable results. We'll walk through an example that we've derived from the transportation industry, and we'll discuss leveraging business architecture for digital transformation as an example of how you can use business architecture for transformation. We'll also briefly discuss breaking the chains of legacy IT architectures through the use of business architecture and the transparency it delivers. We'll provide some industry examples of what different industries are doing with business architecture. And we'll also talk about succeeding and failing with business architecture. With business architecture today, there's a number of organizations that are just starting out. They should learn the lessons of the past from the organizations who have been in it for a while. There's some tremendous successes, but along with every success, as you know from famous inventors from the past, is trying to do something and having it fail, and then trying it again and finding that there's a better way. So with organizations who have been in business architecture for a number of years and using it and leveraging it, they've tried some different things to get going and have moved on from first generation and second generation business architecture to the maturity level that we have today. And then finally, we'll talk about engaging the issues and moving forward from that point. So a brief description of business architecture. It delivers horizontal and vertical business ecosystem transparency. We are talking about the business. We are not talking about IT. The focus is on business-driven business transformation. So what, may you ask, is a business ecosystem? Well, the Business Architecture Guild, BizBoc, defines the business ecosystem as one or more legal entities, in whole or in part, that exist as an integrated community of individuals and assets or aggregations thereof, interacting as a cohesive whole towards a common mission or purpose. So let's take that down to some industries that you're familiar with. We have business ecosystems that involve multiple companies. Why? Because any given company doesn't work alone. They require business partners. In some cases, there's joint ventures. In other cases, there's tightly integrated sets of companies that form business ecosystems, like the life insurance company that provides a life insurance product, but only through the customer network of the healthcare companies that it works with. Or there's a conglomerate where any given individual division or company is dramatically different in terms of customer and mission and other reasons, so those individual conglomerates might become the ecosystem. In the first example, it's all the companies that become the ecosystem. We look at ecosystems with business architecture because if you just look at your legal entity, it's difficult to see how things work when you completely eliminate your partner network. Business ecosystems, therefore, are not constrained to internal views, business units, or technologies, and include the extended customer experience across partner domains. One indicator, do you share customers? If you share customers, then you want to look at the broader ecosystem. When you expose and map those ecosystems using business architecture, transformation, large and small, becomes highly viable. So let's take a look at some value proposition with business architecture. One is enabling policy and regulatory compliance. What's actually happening there? We're really understanding all things about our business, where policy fits in. There's a formal concept of policy mapping, which includes regulatory mapping in business architecture. You can tie it to your business DNA and every view up. Therefore, you can get a better understanding of how you want to manage policy and comply to regulatory requirements. Building clarity of focus around risk and change management. If I can understand where these different aspects of the business exist, and I can see them in a clear way across horizontal and vertical domains, in other words, business units, both deep and broad, then I can more effectively manage risk and change. I can inform and expedite product innovation. When product teams have ideas, I can understand the impacts of those new ideas on the business capabilities and the ripple effect downstream. I can realize business model changes, for example, going from customer or product-driven to customer-driven. I can deliver strategy and innovation deployments. I can maximize the customer experience because now I have a way to align, for example, my value stream delivery with customer journey maps, the pain points, and the other areas where the customer is real key. I can streamline stakeholder engagement and value delivery, and that's for internal and external stakeholders, meaning my customers, my business partners, and also all my internal stakeholders, regardless of what business unit they're in. And then I can build end-to-end transparency of strategy interpretation through solution delivery. No longer will I have large-scale projects where anybody on the project would be able to say, I don't know what this is for, I have no understanding of it, I'm just done what I'm told. We would have complete transparency and traceability back to the measurable business objectives that are driving those initiatives from one end to the other, and that includes through the solution deployments, through the IT assets, through the detailed business requirements, and through all other aspects of what's happening. And finally, I can enable a wide range of transformation scenarios so that I can allow the business to more effectively perform not just one, but multiple transformations and transformation scenarios and understand how they relate to each other. So let's take a look at just a couple of examples, 3 or 4 examples of business transformation. I might be going from product-centric to customer-centric. What exactly does that mean? Well, today, for many organizations that are highly siloed, when you're working with a customer, they can only view one silo, or you can only view them through one silo. That way, if I have multiple products, multiple policies, multiple accounts that a given customer might have across the business, from the inside out, you're seeing that customer as a standalone entity, and they have no idea that it has a relation. That customer is the same customer that has other products, other policies, other accounts, or engages in other ways with the rest of your business. That siloing is highly frustrating to customer. It can cost you customers, and it creates a situation in your business where you're creating multiple solutions, ineffective solutions, because they are replicated and not aligned across your business. I want to switch that to a customer-centric view. That means there's one view of the customer across the business for everybody in the business, and the customer gets better value, and the business can be more effective in delivering that value. Or moving from regionally siloed to globally aligned. I might have something where I have individual businesses and countries, and those business units are replicated in other places. So I've not only created a vertical siloing along different product lines, but I've created a horizontal silo across geographic lines. And we call that a matrix silo structure. In those cases, all the issues that I talked about in the first challenge, the first scenario, are multiplied to the extreme across the second one. What we're trying to do is get to a common view both vertically and horizontally across the business. How does business architecture do that? It opens up, it removes a siloed view through concepts like value streams, capabilities, and other views into the business so that you can see the business as one. And then you can realign the business units back in through concepts such as organizational mapping so that you get common views of value delivery, capabilities, and information. And of course, as you need to understand the role of different individual business units, you can do that. Or I'm going from the maker of vehicles, where I have a piece of iron with 4 wheels, to something that's very different, where my car is really a piece of technology, as I'm showing over to the right, that's highly interconnected through a number of different means to the customer devices, to the multiple drivers that might be driving the car into the broader technology world beyond. And another example is digitally challenged to highly digitized. We talk about moving to digitized business environments or ecosystems. We talk about digital transformation. How can we do that if we don't understand what the business looks like? Certainly not by building more technology on top of our existing silos. We have to understand every aspect of our business. Business architecture can provide that. And the links to the technology that's there today and the gaps that exist, the capability-based gaps that exist between your current infrastructure, technology infrastructure, and the broad-based ecosystem technology digitization that needs to occur. So we can do that in much more effective ways when we connect everything through the business architecture and can then see the current and then the future state requirements for digitizing the business. We talked earlier about moving from strategy to actionable results. In this scenario, we're talking about looking at, there's many types of strategy mapping approaches, 10, 12, 15, depending on how you measure it. What we try to boil all of those down to are what are the innovations coming out of there? What are the measurable, deliverable, attainable business objectives that I can attach quantifiable objective measures to and that I can attain, and that I have action items associated with those. As I have those, I can then frame those through the business architecture, the core of the business architecture being value streams, capabilities, what the business does, value stream, how it delivers value to stakeholders. These are not lean value streams. These are not processes. These are end-to-end views of stakeholder value delivery. Through information concepts, what information do I use? And through organization mapping. What does my organization look like and how does it fit in? With actionable results being everything from the business roadmap through initiative definition and alignment across multiple initiatives that today may be redundant or conflicting, through a much more intelligent way to do funding and investment of those initiatives, to business IT transformation, all the way from planning those to retooling IT architectures to delivering real solutions. What happens is that we frame those through business scenarios. And while we have many, many business scenarios, everything from digitizing the business to going to globally aligned versus product aligned and customer centric, we have many scenarios, but they're all going through essentially the same business. So we can understand not only how all the pieces fit together in one scenario, but we can see cross-scenario impacts. And that's very key. So when we look at these types of things, we like to understand what's essentially the framework for being able to deliver these types of advancements using business architecture. This is what we call the business architecture framework, and it enables business transformation. The business architecture framework has 3 main elements to it. It has a knowledge base, which is what you're looking at in the center. It's called the centralized business knowledge base. And all the things I've been talking about, capabilities, value streams, information, organization, all that information is there. And it's tied to and linked to business strategy, products, policy, stakeholders, and business initiative, and measurable by metrics. That knowledge base, then, is a place where I can draw any information I need based on the business scenario that I have in mind. I might have inquiries in pre-planning. I might need to feed strategy certain information about how well I'm doing in certain areas. And once I define the strategy, I need to interpret that strategy and see what the impacts are in terms of driving investments into initiatives. I can incorporate product perspectives, understand policy impacts, and look at all my stakeholder impacts and the role of stakeholders as they move through. So we have business scenarios that essentially shape the kind of information I need and the actions that I'm going to take and the interpretations that I'm going to do. That's where the work is performed. And the blueprints, which are essentially a term that's being used to provide an understanding and insights into the knowledge base on a selective basis as required on a scenario-by-scenario basis. So many, many scenarios reaching into the same knowledge base, framing that information in many, many, almost countless different ways through the blueprint perspective. So that framework essentially lays the foundation for the other kinds of things we want to do. What are some of those kinds of things we want to do? Well, it's important when we talk about business architecture to understand the differentiation between the business architecture and the concept of the business operating model. Now, a couple of points here. The business operating model is what we're looking at that talks about how things are done. So we define that as the abstract representation of how an organization operates across a range of domains to accomplish its function. There's a definition below for that and a source for that definition. What's inside of the operating model? What are the kinds of things we're looking at? Things like business processes that tell us how things are done. Things like events and decisions. So we have event models and decision models and detailed business rules. Things like our IT assets, our IT deployments, our IT architecture. So it's all of our data. That's all of the software systems that are running our businesses. So everything from the detailed processes to the events to the spreadsheets on your desktop to the technologies. Those are operating model views. Those things change continuously. They're highly volatile, and that's okay because they're adjusting to the evolution of the business. But if you're continuously evolving your operating model with no understanding of your business architecture and your business ecosystem through the views that we're providing in this framework, then you're not getting a full picture of how you want to drive your operating model forward. What you're doing is you're really lacking elements in understanding how to improve and drive your operating model. And those are many times those exercises to drive the operating model changes being done in vacuums or in silos and not understanding what's happening around. So when you can tie the pieces together, when you can understand what role processes have in delivering customer value, or you can understand exactly which capabilities are being deployed today or need to be deployed in the future through your IT architecture and your IT solutions, or you can understand how to interpret and frame events and decision models and business rules in the context of value delivery and capabilities. When you can understand that and you have those views, you can be much more effective in delivering a wide variety of transformation scenarios. One comment that I should make when I talk about operating models is that's different from the business model. The business model, and some of you may be familiar with the business model canvas, is something that's really used to frame how a business delivers stakeholder value. Business architecture can be used to both interpret and align business models and to provide that bridge between business model transformation and operating model on-the-ground investments and changes that occur. So we have business architecture still playing a role in interpreting the business model that might be cast or multiple business models to understand the investments you need to make, the roadmaps you need to lay out, and the operating model changes that need to occur down in the details. So that's very critical when you're looking at business architecture and its role in the larger context. Now let's take a look at visualizing and transforming a digital customer experience. And we're going to use an example of an airline where somebody plans to take a trip. And this is a value stream. It's called the Take a Trip value stream. They plan the trip. They ticket the trip. They initiate the departure. Now they depart. They arrive at their destination. That could be the interim destination. If it's the interim destination and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 legs on that, they'll go back to the value streams can move forwards and backwards. They'll reinitiate another departure, depart, arrive, and continue through that cycle. All the things that happen essentially linked to the fact that the customer is taking a trip would essentially be occurring during these value stream stages. Ultimately, the trip would be terminated. There would be a series of activities that are occurring there. So we're getting a complete view of taking the trip. We have a different value stream that's essentially getting a plane from point A to point B. Now remember, the customer taking a trip may take many different planes to get there. And the plane they end up taking may not be the plane that they initially were going to take. They ticket the trip, they initiate departure. While they're going through that cycle, they're going through security. They get held up at the security gate for whatever reason. They miss their flight. They're going to get on a different plane ultimately. The airline will help them eventually get on another plane. They'll take that plane to their destination and eventually get to where they're going. There's no dependency between taking that trip and flying the route with the other touch, with the exception of the specific touch point of the plane that happens to be the one that they get on, which may not be the plane they were initially going to get on. And the second plane that they get on to get to their destination may not be the plane that they initially plan to get on, and the other one. However, there's an entire value stream that's being run by any given airline thousands of times a day where they plan the flight, they finalize the pre-flight preparations, they take off, they navigate to their destination, they arrive at their destination, they terminate the flight. And all of that value stream that's being executed thousands of times a day by any given large airline worldwide is simply moving a plane from point A to point B. And the relationship between the first value stream and the second value stream comes down to the business object, being the plane, that intersects and happens to be the same business object that is temporarily moving through one value stream versus the other, going at the same time. And they're linked together, and as the state of that plane changes, for example, it's departed, it's no longer available to the take a trip stream, so a different plane will have to fill that role. And capabilities, and you don't show any arrows between these, that's overcomplicates things. Capabilities, including a number of shared capabilities that are occurring between the two value streams, and business objects that are moving through there, allow this to occur. We've dramatically simplified the overall view of how this works in a way that allows a business to independently break these things up, do more effective planning on an end-to-end basis, and then connect them through the sophistication that business architecture provides. Again, parallel value streams, decoupling complex business perspectives, delivers end-to-end transparency with value delivery, taking a 360 perspective of, in one case, the plane, in the other case, the customer. So we can get very sophisticated through these perspectives, very critical. So what makes business architecture unique? Well, what makes business architecture unique is that we're not just drawing pretty pictures with the value streams, and there's a lot more behind value streams than we'll be able to cover today. But what we are indicating here is that we have enabling capabilities that are defined consistently, non-redundantly, across a business that are reused on a case-by-case-by-case basis across many value streams. And those capabilities are robust, well-defined, highly rationalized, non-redundant views of what the business does, top to bottom, one into the other, and they exist in a single capability map that anybody can draw from. So again, what makes it unique? Capabilities serving as a robust focal point for linking strategy, information, deployment, business unit, partner alignment, technology transformation, because we can also link it to all of the tools and technologies we have out there. So therefore, we have the stakeholder view, end-to-end stakeholder view, taking a trip, for example, with the value streams that are enabled by consistent, rationalized, again, well-defined business capabilities that enable value delivery across those value streams. If you do not clearly articulate and understand and embrace the relationship between business capabilities and value streams, then you are not understanding the core and the guts of business architecture. And I'm going to say that again because it is very critical. If you have not adopted and incorporated and internalized and embraced the relationship between formal value streams and business capabilities as I'm describing it, you are not essentially framing a viable business architecture. So that is very critical to remember when you're going through and using business architecture. Now, transformation strategy begins with innovative thinking and strategy definition. We talked about going end to end. We talked about moving all the way back up the stream to understanding exactly what that does. So let's take our value stream again, and we call that, again, take a trip. And what we'd like to do is do some planning around this. And we have strategies that are identifying, that are driven by various innovative thinking and design thinking. And those strategies are translating into measurable, hardcore objectives that we can measure and apply. And we need to link those formal objectives and the actions to be taken, and business architecture helps with this, to the value streams and the capabilities that are necessary to enable that to occur. So when viewing strategic objectives based on stakeholder value and capability impacts that enable businesses to more effectively assess and justify investments and measure objective compliance, this is the framing that you want to use. And from these views, planning teams can articulate the information, initiative, product, and IT asset impacts because they're linked to the capabilities, and we can fan out from the capabilities to all of these other impacts, leading to more effective cost-benefit analysis up front, early in the cycle, and eliminating unworkable or non-viable options or strategies that you're looking at when you're doing your planning, because you can narrow that funnel much more quickly by having these insights early in the planning cycle as opposed to guessing through what the impacts of a given strategy might be. Okay, let's click ahead here. All right, so let's take a look at another framing of business architecture as it stands to support continuous digital transformation. And we talk about continuous digital transformation because we know this is not one journey. With digital transformation, we require visibility across the business ecosystem. And digital transformation, while some people may think it's a buzzword, is an ongoing exercise that organizations have to take. But if we only apply it to our back-end systems, to what we can see, to what maybe the IT organization can actually see, we're missing huge opportunities. One is many of the capabilities in our business have no automation today, and those are oftentimes beyond the line of sight of the technology people. Two is that our ecosystems are much broader than the internal work that we've automated, and they include a much broader focus of our business as we looked at with the different value streams. So when we look at digital transformation, we have to have visibility into investments, initiatives, and business objectives focused on value stream and value delivery. We have to look at the stakeholders, capabilities, information, product, policy, IT assets, impacts. And we want to have that broad ecosystem transparency that enables rapid cross-business, cross-product, cross-IT asset impact analysis. So what we're looking at here with Take a Trip is we're showing the enabling capabilities linked to the underlying technologies, and we're also looking at the stakeholders who not only trigger but also participate along the way in these value streams. And not all of them work for us. Not all of them are our employees. Not all of them are our contractors or agents. It includes a broad variety of folks that you'd run into at the airport, and it also includes the customer going through here. So as you start to break down your innovations and your strategies and what you want to accomplish in terms of digitizing your business, you can break those down to certain points of value delivery and very specific enabling capabilities that allow that to occur. so that you can highlight the capabilities and the value delivery impacts that those capabilities will have all along the way. So as you go through this, what you're doing is essentially looking at how digital transformation can be employed through the lens of business architecture to the broader business ecosystem. And frankly, if you don't have that lens, I have no idea how you tackle it or where you start. And what many organizations are doing today is just trying to change their back-end IT systems and taking a technology approach as opposed to a full business approach to digital transformation. So again, we're looking at parallel scenarios so we can align those scenarios because digital transformation will be happening concurrently. For example, it might be happening while you're also trying to undergo changes to your customer focus, your business model, or other things. So having that broader view through business architecture is very critical to delivering that type of value in the long run. Let's take a look at the impact a little bit further of digital transformation for organizations that have a large investment in legacy technologies, and that's most all large organizations. We have these enabling technologies. For better or for worse, they're working today. They're automating at least enough of our capabilities to deliver enough business value along the way to keep us in business and maybe even to have us thrive in our particular industry. However, those underlying technologies are often siloed. They tend to be intertwined. They happen to be non-transparent, and they also represent large gaps, either because of their fragmentation or their heavy redundancy of how they implement business capabilities today. So linking your capabilities to your current state legacy information and legacy technologies will help you understand more clearly how you need to change those legacy technologies to deliver on any number of a wide range of business transformation initiatives. So what you want to do is drive change through capabilities to allow business to reinvent themselves through a variety of ways, again, driven by value delivery, such as our examples we've been showing, to leapfrog potentially past archaic technologies to a digitized future. We'll talk a little bit more on the next slide about what those impacts are. But just to remember, capabilities provide direct and unambiguous link to all aspects of your IT automation. If they cannot serve in that role, then you have to take another look at your capability map to ensure it was developed using firm principles that deliver a robust perspective on unique, highly rationalized, clearly defined business capabilities that have been evolved based on the business objects in your business that they're defining the capabilities for. That is essential because if your capability map cannot support this, then everything you're trying to do that we've been talking about up to this point can potentially collapse. Now let's take one more deeper look into the legacy systems, and then we'll jump back to summarize some other points. So legacy IT architectures, they automate business capabilities today using piecemeal, fragmented, redundant approaches. The majority of IT investments plug fixes on top of unstable baseline, creating more instability, creating the spaghetti architecture you see in the middle there of the application and data and technical architectures, and also don't forget the shadow systems, the thousands or tens of thousands of desktop technologies that IT has no idea are out there that are performing critical business capabilities across the business on a day-to-day basis, sometimes daisy-chained together in complex ways. So when we look at the legacy environment, we not only look at the formal application and data and technical architectures, we also have to look at those shadow systems. The majority of investments in these technologies add more technology on top of them. A vice president in a business unit once said to me, we put in a new system last month, and I had to add 15 new spreadsheets in order to use that system. How is that progress? IT-driven transformation, many times today, because it is IT-driven, tends to reinforce the redundancy, the silos, the process-driven and hard-to-transform solutions. Major IT investments often create more risk and technical debt, leading to architectural bankruptcy. You have to think about where you want to be in 5 to 10 years architecturally. Are you just going to pick up the spaghetti nest that's on the left and move it to a new environment? Or are you going to use a business-driven approach to enabling transformation that can not only deliver new value to the business along the lines of all the business scenarios we were talking about, but ensure that what you're moving to is a sound architecture within IT architecture overall. So what we want to focus on when moving from left to right are business-driven, capability-focused, value stream-framed approaches to getting from these points. And that will allow you to further put in event-driven, more sophisticated environments longer term as final solutions. Now, let's take a look worldwide across a number of industries. There's very few industries that are not leveraging or have not leveraged business architecture in a number of ways. The first one we have here is manufacturing. And manufacturing companies are using business architecture to a significant degree, and it's on a worldwide basis. There's transforming their global business models in some cases where they might be replicated across many, many different regions or locations. They might be shifting from just a maker of products to a more intelligent, more sophisticated environment. So moving from the old models to the new models, becoming more innovative, becoming much more customer-focused, becoming much more sophisticated in how they deliver what they're delivering, and really providing a wide variety of new customer experiences to the business. Financial services, another industry that's using business architecture extensively. Translating strategy, vision into execution. These are quotes that we've gotten from some businesses. Connecting the dots, visualizing architecture layers and solutions. Leveraging capabilities to enable strategic planning. And again, these are worldwide. We see organizations doing these types of things. And they're quite sophisticated and quite advanced, and they continue to move forward. Healthcare providers, another area where very recently we've seen quite a surge in the use of business architecture. They're using business architecture to drive outcomes. They're using it to focus on capability-based outcomes. We're starting to see a growth in the healthcare provider field there, and also connecting not just providers but also payers. So we're starting to see it in the networks and other areas. Government IP offices, and this is actually happening as well internationally from a number of different countries, transforming automation across their ecosystem, delivering end-to-end automation across all business units in the public, and beginning to integrate more effectively with their partner environments, because the worldwide patent and trademark and IP environments are a large network centered with the World Intellectual Property Organization. And of course, there's lots of individual treaties, but there's lots of integration that goes on through there. And so that's important to think of. So when you're looking at business ecosystems, that's an example of a much broader ecosystem where you cannot necessarily get a patent, for example, for the European Union if you're outside of the European Union without going through, for example, the World Intellectual Property Organization or one of these other organizations or treaties. So we're looking at much broader ecosystems, so we have to look outside and beyond just the internal silos. Transportation, being used by a number of different transportation companies, not just transporting people, but freight and a number of other things. Executing mergers and acquisitions, reevaluating and realigning partner structures. There's certainly lots of other things going on. And insurance, one of the largest users. And these are all kinds of insurance, both between healthcare payers and property and casualty and life and disability and so forth. It's a wide range, and we see insurance companies wide and far using these. Analyze and evaluate and inform capability-based investments, transforming the business model to more of a customer focus. So some of these organizations have been using it for many, many years, but a very sophisticated way of using business architecture is emerging across all of these organizations. So what's the transformation imperative? What are we really talking about today? One is to reset inwardly focused thinking to holistic ecosystem perspectives. Stop thinking internally. Stop thinking about just cost cutting in your technology area. Stop thinking about just becoming more effective for one process in one business unit, which may, by the way, cause problems in other business units if you don't have the full ecosystem view. Consider business ecosystems beyond the internal roles, beyond the internal processes. Look more broadly. Look at the ecosystem as a whole. And somebody might think, well, you're talking about boiling the ocean. Well, that's not the case. We're talking about surveying the ocean at a broad-based level and then drilling deep where necessary based on that complete view, as opposed to what happens many times today of drilling too deep, too quickly in one area with absolutely no transparency and visibility to the surrounding impacts. So we establish a broad-based perspective with business architecture. It can be done fairly quickly. And what you want to do is move from building your business architecture to deploying and practicing and using your business architecture in all aspects of the business. Break out of a mindset. Step outside what one quote, which I'll share with you right now, from Paul Priest is called the IT Iron Curtain. Right? He said that build a business architecture initiative. Paul Priest is the CEO of ISA, and this is a quote from TechTarget.com, IASA. To own business transformation, you have to get out from behind the iron curtain of IT. The last thing is to understand value, not features or requirements, but outcomes. And you have to do that. And that includes, for all of the IT architects who are focused on IT architecture, which has a tendency to be more technical and slightly more inwardly focused, is to step outside of there to get a broader view. Cast aside narrowly focused technology-centric perspectives. Break down your business silos because they become barriers to success. Break them down. Business architecture wants to look beyond that. Drive transformation from the outside in, not the inside out. Look at it from your true customer's perspective, the end consumer, the people that you're exchanging value with in the outside world, or the organizations you're exchanging value with in the outside world, not from the internal view. And important, understanding why is business architecture different? Well, several things. Business architecture it's reusable. We don't build capability maps every year. We don't build 12 of them. We build one capability map one time. And I had a business architect say to me from a government agency that's been around for well over 200 years, if our founder had built this business architecture capability map, we would have probably been, and it was based on the same principles, we would be able to be using that capability map today with a few additions and a few changes. Business architecture deplores a silo. It hates a silo. With the exception of the organization mapping, business architecture looks at things from a boundaryless business. It not only looks across your business units, because value streams must by definition, and capabilities must by definition look across business units. It also looks at your partner environments and the broader ecosystem as a whole. So don't try to silo business architecture. It will make it fail. It's not just another technique. It has to be adopted broadly. If you don't adopt it broadly, then you're not going to get its value. You can't take business architecture and put it in a jar. You can't take business architecture and say, I'm going to test it on a little project. It doesn't work that way. Don't even try to start that way. Right? It's not like process modeling or agile. It's systemic and broad-based, and it's top to bottom, and it goes beyond your internal views. It requires executive commitment, as you might guess, because of the holistic perspective, and it requires a runway to build up, which means you have to develop a practice alongside of it and a governance model to support it. Proof of concepts tend to fail for the reasons I was just talking about. Proof of concepts tend to try to bottle up business architecture into a small project or a silo. It's not a technical solution. It's not going to work. Don't even try. Okay? Success results from use. Failure results from silo-based deployments. So you have to keep this in mind when you're going through these exercises. However, having said all that, business architecture can be deployed and grow organically. So while you're establishing and building out your baseline, you can get to a point where that baseline relatively quickly can become the framework for beginning to use it. And we've seen organizations that are still in the have the bulk of the capability mapping to go, but have already developed enough with their value streams and their capability map, at least on the level 2, where they can start using business architecture to interpret the impacts of initiatives, cross-initiative impacts, interpreting strategy and innovation, identifying impacts to IT architectures. Now, as you go deeper and you do more work with business architecture, you need to rapidly build those out. So it doesn't mean that you can't use these artifacts in the early stages. What it does mean is as you're using them, you need to continue to build them out, and you need to not let the practice outrun the building, and you need to make sure you have a framed approach to getting there. How to proceed? Well, let's talk about that. Get educated. Build an internal base of business architecture knowledge. Start and mature business architecture initiatives outside the Iron Curtain. That means in the business. Stop reinventing the wheel on every project. Business architecture is reusable. You shouldn't have 12 of these, and 12 projects, and you shouldn't have 12 business capability maps. Network with peers. Understand what other organizations and peer companies are doing. Tap into industry reference models. There's work going on. The Business Architecture Guild, for example, has 4 and probably soon to start 5 reference models being built for different industries. Stop doing the same things and expecting the different results as people have been doing by ignoring business architecture. Now, here's some additional sources of information. The definitive source for business architecture. The Business Architecture Guild is a not-for-profit. I want to make it very clear. It doesn't sell products. It doesn't do consulting. It's a broad community network of members who are trying to advance business architecture, and it's done in a number of ways. One is to continuously advance through at least 2 releases a year the business architecture body of knowledge, which is called the BizBock Guide. It's a source for contributing to and accessing leading-edge white papers. You can work shoulder to shoulder also with leading experts across a number of fields in the Guild. Again, it is a not-for-profit. It's not a money-making endeavor. It is a large community of folks working together. They sponsor webinars, workshops, summits, and industry testimonials, organizing a network of collaborative teams, owner and manager of the Certified Business Architect or CBA certification exam, and it offers a Guild-accredited training partner program, of which there's a number of training partners worldwide. So you can get the information there at businessarchitectureguild.org. Again, this was sponsored by OMG, so I want to thank them, the Business Architecture Guild, of course, and with large contributions from Business Architecture Associates, Inc. With that, I'll turn it back to Meg.
Hi, thank you very much, Bill. I wanted to see if we could answer a few questions from the audience. We have about 10 minutes left before the time is up. One question that came in asks, what would be the role of enterprise architecture in the business architecture context?
Good question on enterprise architecture. I didn't show the slide, but business architecture as a practice and as a discipline, I should say. As a discipline, business architecture is part of the family of enterprise architecture. Enterprise architecture, of course, has data architecture and application architecture and technology architecture, which according to the Federation of Enterprise Architecture Professional Organizations is sort of the core pillars. I think we have a link to an article that I did with Richard Soleit that explains this in more detail. Business architecture drives change through all of those architectural perspectives, including the more horizontally placed solution architecture, with solution architecture really driving things that are more oriented to specific solutions or scenarios. So business architecture is in the family. As far as where it lives in the organization, that's purely up to the business. But we are seeing more and more, and many of the highly successful business architecture efforts where the business architecture unit is in the business and not in IT and has a very good working relationship with the enterprise architecture team, which then manages all the other more technically oriented architecture. So organizationally, it's up to you how you want to structure it. From a discipline perspective, they are related. But I can tell you successfully that there's a number of many businesses actually probably becoming the majority where business architecture is being deployed in the business as opposed to in the technology group.
Thank you. We also have a question that says, how long has business architecture been around? It seems relatively new.
It's not new. It's been practiced probably on and off in many, many forms, and I would say for probably around 20 years. The outgrowth grew organically from things that were being done in the 90s on things that used to be called functions but were highly limiting, siloed, a bit redundant, more technically oriented, much more of a how. Where capabilities emerged probably from the early to late 2003, 2010, but really became more formalized and robust between 2010 and today. Value streams emerged initially in James Martin's works from the Great Transition, but evolved in maturity up through 2010. In 2010, 2011 is when they were connected and all the other parts were put together. So the formal view of business architecture we're looking at today dates back 5 to 6 years. The parts to it, including strategy mapping and initiative mapping and a lot of those types of things, the different parts to it have been around for a long time. The connection and integration and really seamless integration of all those components into a framework, that's occurred over the past 6 years.
Thank you. Here's another question, which is, how does one introduce business architecture into a business?
Good question on introducing business architecture. What I always like to tell people is there's a wide variety of ways based on your culture, your buy-in. We have gone to executives that have understood it and bought into it quickly and initiated efforts coming from the top down. I'd like to also say that that's probably been a little bit more of the exception than the rule than we'd like. We've also seen it introduced organically from the bottom up. And as you're introducing it organically and starting to build out some of the artifacts and building out some approaches that you want to demonstrate in terms of where it delivers value, what you want to do is communicate value proposition to the executive tiers. And it may be getting to a director level, depending on your organizational structure, and then move it up to a VP level. It may be going to the VP level and trying to move it up from there. But the one thing that has to occur at some point is executive peer-to-peer communication, so that you have some degree of sponsorship at some senior level that can then do peer-to-peer buy-in, and not necessarily upwards at that point, but across the other executive tiers. So sell the value. Don't sell the technology. Sell the value. Focus on value. Provide examples. Provide some of your own internal examples of how it could be deployed, and also identify your internal pain points, investment areas, projects that maybe are struggling in terms of large-scale planning or initiatives. Take a look at some of those and try to see if you can come up with some of your own examples based on the industry work out there.
Thanks. So here's a question asking, who owns the business architecture responsibility, and what is a typical reporting structure?
Owning business architecture responsibility is, the words say it, business architecture owned by the business. That's the way I view it. Now, I view the business as the entire business, but in order to, the governance question, which is part 2 of the question, is probably just or more important than that first part. In terms of governance, we've seen the best success where business architecture was independent of any vested interest. And when I say vested interest, I mean a couple of things. It's outside of IT, because if you have it in IT, it's going to be IT-driven and IT-focused, and it's going to end up getting somewhat siloed into a technology view. If it's outside of IT, it shouldn't be aligned to just marketing or just production or just sales or just operations. What it should be is independent of those units, reporting up to some sort of horizontal team. The successful ones that we've seen, probably the largest case, are where they're reporting to a strategic planning team or work as a peer group to a strategic planning team that might be reporting up to some sort of COO or VP who has the responsibility for planning and innovation and those types of things. So those are the best places where it's been put. It's been put in many areas, but if you can keep it from being stuck into a vested interest area, the idea is to get it aligned as close as you can to your strategy team so that they can pair up and partner.
Thank you. Here's a question which asks, what are some critical success factors in business architecture?
Critical success factors. One is demonstrating value in use. And when talking about critical success factors, and I'm just really going to talk about the outcomes for a second, and then I'll get back to the other pieces of it. Critical success factors in terms of use is when you have initiative planning teams or the portfolio management team asking for your insights and views so that you can, and there's as much value as streamlining initiatives, informing initiatives, as saying that this initiative is a bad investment, don't make it. Save that $1 million, spend it elsewhere. So combining initiatives. So when you have initiative teams, when you have architectural planning teams on the enterprise architecture side, the IT and application architecture saying, we need this information. When you've got the requirements team asking for the business architecture or saying that we're not going to work without the business architecture, those are some things that you can look at from a practice perspective. The key thing is delivering some value that can be quantifiable up the ladder. So, try to identify 2 or 3 value delivery points that you can give maybe on a year in and year out basis. The second element is the practice. Getting a viable capability map down to level 3 that's non-redundant, clearly defined across the board, getting a set of value streams that people have bought into. Those are some success factors, because once you can get those and you can get people looking at those and buying into those are really key.
Thank you. I think we have maybe time for just one more question. How does business architecture integrate with other disciplines?
Excellent question. So first of all, when you start a business architecture or you're building a business architecture practice, one key thing you need that is part of your practice, and many organizations don't spend enough time on this, is an engagement model. So your engagement model has to talk about the engagement and value business architecture will bring and deliver to these other business units. So for example, strategic planning. It informs strategic planning because it's delivering heat maps and other metrics up to the strategy team to inform maybe their focal points for planning going forward from year to year. And once the strategic objectives are developed, you can interpret the impacts of those objectives very quickly back out. That's one integration point. A second integration point is looking at customer experience and understanding how the different customer journeys, the pain points, and the other areas of the customer experience, moments that matter, all align to different value stream journeys. So there's another integration point, and how we can take the customer experience views and delineate those and deploy them back through the business architecture. Integration back to the business requirements team, absolutely key. There should not be a business requirement that's not linked up to a business capability, and that is essential. That takes time. We've seen that that's been one of the slower things to occur in many organizations, but once you get there, there's a high degree of value. Integrating with portfolio managers, helping with aligned portfolio planning, looking at cross-portfolio impacts, and for planning purposes, and that gets back to the investment front end of these initiatives as well as the management of those initiatives, and to IT architecture, providing capabilities to the services-oriented architecture to understand how to frame and deploy those, providing them to the architects that are looking at transformation, providing information concepts to the data architects. So you need an engagement map laid out. I haven't listed all of the points of touch points, but you need to have a clear engagement with all of those organizational units as you're building it out and as you're using it.
Thank you very much, Bill. It looks like we are just about out of time, so at this point I would like to, on behalf of Object Management Group, thank everyone for joining us today for this webinar, and we welcome you to explore OMG's BrightTalk channel for other recorded webinars that may be of interest to you. Thanks very much for attending.